The problem with the rat race is, even if you win, you're still a rat. Lily Tomlin. The Daily Grind, Chapter 169. I got the most interesting call from the FBI last night, Sarah informed James as he stepped out of the telepad arrival zone. Telepads could, technically, go anywhere, but they often took things like my office or behind my desk to be suggestions and not actual directions, in addition to several other limiters that were constantly butting up against reality. So the arrival areas were set up to correct the occasional problem, marked off spaces on the floor that had patterns you could sketch out, and the telepads wouldn't really miss, or at least hadn't missed yet. They still wrote down the one at this address. The order wasn't stupid, and at least one person was aware of the fact that someone could intercept a teleport if they knew how it worked just by marking their own floor, so redundancies were important. Two-factor teleportation, as it were. The FBI, you say? James pretended to act surprised. What did they want? Mostly to tell me I was going to throw my life away and end up in jail for decades if I didn't roll over and play nice. Sarah's face was still smiling, but there was a vicious little note in her voice that James didn't tend to hear from her very often. I said yes, obviously. Oh? Well, curse you and your sudden and unexpected betrayal, I guess. That's not the right line. Say the right line, Sarah admonished him. James kept walking toward the elevator, letting Sarah fall in behind him as he made his way out of the basement and up to their California office. I'm not really that much of a plagiarist, he told her. Also, how many people got calls? James let his voice turn serious. Everyone you'd expect. Not Nate, though. Haven't heard from JP or Dave. Sarah filled him in. No one who got hit too hard by the office's memeplex thing, but everyone we've hired since then. No one's quit yet, and as far as I know, everyone reported it. If anyone didn't, I guess we wouldn't know, but, well, we're not spying on everyone. Duh. Duh, indeed. James nodded as the doors opened and he stepped off the elevator. No one quit? Well, you know, most of the people in response are there because screw the police, right? A threatening call from big police isn't going to convince them otherwise. Sarah threw her arms in the air. I don't get why they think the answer to there is too much abuse of authority is to do more abuse of authority. Just stop doing that, and it's fine. James smiled sadly as he high-fived the potted plant on the way past and stopped at the vending machine to grab something random. It's a little more complicated than that, he informed her, swirling the can his drink came in around as he checked it for an orb. You're assuming the goal is to eliminate the abuse, which it's not, but whatever, back on track. We're still kicking? Boots and everything, his friend nodded at him. Though against what is kind of up in the air, I guess. It's not like anyone's been secret arrested. Yet? Please don't jinx us, James grimaced, opening the door to his office. Nate was waiting inside. You know, if you don't lock your door, anyone could just come in here and bug everything, he told James bluntly as he stood behind the desk, suspiciously rearranging the bookcase. James gave him a flat look. Stop searching my office, he said. I don't even keep any porn in here. Please, please do not keep your porn in here. Nate didn't miss a beat as he circled back around to the other side of the desk. We've got a problem. Yeah, the FBI is... No, not... Okay, we have two problems, though I'm not sure the Bureau is the problem we think it is. James slid into his chair and let it spin him around once before he kicked to a stop behind his desk, cracking open the can of something labeled fizz juice that he'd gotten from the vending machine. I don't believe you. Threats, harassment, probably bribery. This is the kind of stuff they do when they can't arrest an entire problem, Nate said. It's why it was the go-to for civil rights stuff. Too many people to really bring the hammer down on. But it's not a contemporary tactic, at least that I know of. So to use it here, it means they don't think they could just break the organization. Well, yeah, they literally cannot find us, James said. Unless they're playing the long game. But seriously, I don't think they're an immediate threat, and I have no intention of upgrading them to that unless something actually happens beyond vaguely coercive phone calls to people who are already inclined not to listen. Nate ran a hand across his smooth head. All right, well, I'll go with your say for now, but we've got options if you want to hit him back, just so you know. Options like what? James's voice was more suspicious than curious. Targeted blackmail, financial pressure, assassination if it gets bad enough. Nate shrugged. The usual. No, James deadpanned. Absolutely not, Sarah added in. No murdering people. Nate gave her a contemptuous look. Doesn't make a difference to you that it would be more convenient for them if we're all dead? No! Murder bad! Why is it so hard for boys to learn that? Sarah slapped James's desk. James learned it. James hates learning things. Okay, first off, ow. James frowned. Actually, that kind of does hurt. I like learning things. Also, my relationship with my gender is ambivalent at best, especially considering I've been Alana at least a dozen times. Sarah's cheeks flushed red. I'm sorry. I was trying to use you to make a point. That was mean, wasn't it? I'm sorry. Yeah, you seem angry. About the murder. James pivoted back to Nate. The murder you are absolutely not to do. Please, I'm iffy on if you and JP hijacking traffic cams or snooping on emails that are from people already flagged as threats is okay, but I'm absolutely in the no camp when it comes to teleport murders. What if we only targeted... Nate, come on. James sighed. You won't let me steal nuclear weapons, I won't let you pick off government employees. It's a fair trade. No, it isn't, but I'll drop it for now. The plans don't go away just because you don't need them. Also, you were the one who was talking the other day about where the line is for self-defense when it comes to political power and influence. James nodded slowly. That's true, and I'm okay with us pushing back if they decide to lean into the harassment thing, but going from threatening phone calls to murder is an escalation I don't want to deal with, even if only for the reason that they own Predator drones. Nate gave an easy shrug and a tilt of his head. Your funeral. Anyway, I got lunch to make. You two have fun figuring out if I bugged your office to prove a point. What was the other problem? James called after him as the tattooed chef headed out of his office. Nate paused to half step back around the door. Oh, I was going to complain about Cisco delivery drivers, but your stuff is more important and I don't want to get into it today. Have fun with that. He turned and vanished. Sarah caught James's eye with raised eyebrows. Do you think he actually bugged your office? Nah, he'd have to be super lazy to have it only done it now. Also, I don't care. James leaned back as far as his chair would let him go without pitching backwards. Hey, can you help me out with something? He asked her. Sure, that's what friends do. Sarah gave him a shining smile, the room practically lighting up as she broadcast happiness to him. James grinned back and shook his head in marvel at how she could just do that. Okay, we're going to the mountain next week, all things working out. I just want to figure out who exactly is going. How many people do you need? Sarah asked. Because that's kind of relevant. From Momo's experience, I don't think we want more than 6 or 7, at least not for our scouting run, James said. The place is harsh, low visibility, it would be too easy to get separated. I want a group small enough that we can't accidentally lose track of half the party. Okay, but wouldn't you just then have 2 parties? Sarah asked. Why not take literally everyone? Oh, no, never mind. Yeah, because we are absolutely not an organization entirely composed of superheroes, James reminded her. I know that's actually easier to fix than it probably should be, but most of our magic stuff works best inside a civilization, not on Mount Doom. Is that what you think they named it? She asked with a smirk. I actually don't know. I'm meeting Morgan, Color of Dawn, and Liz later to check. Apparently, Chavoy didn't want to take part in the naming thing anyway. She just muttered something about an engineer's curse and then wandered off. That's probably not a real thing. Yeah, I think she made it up. James shrugged. Anyway, do you want to come with me? Oh, heck no, Sarah answered instantly. Sounds awful. I know we talked about it, and I don't want you to die, and I trust you and stuff, but it sounds cold and miserable, and I'm just going to farm an extra batch of purples to copy while you're gone. What? We had a whole bonding moment over this. We were going to do the whole thing together. James threw his head back. I'll be all alone now, surrounded by strangers. Strangers and the 2 people you love most in the world? Sarah quipped at him. James paused in his answer. You know, it's weird. I don't know how to answer that. But also, yes, that. Sort of. It's weird. My brain instantly rebels against saying most to anything. Playing favorites, whatever. It's okay to be uncertain of things, you know, Sarah told him. I don't think anyone's going to take it personally. Ha! James barked out a laugh. I live in a constant state of expecting people to take things personally. It's not healthy, probably. Anyway, we can unpack my rapidly degrading mental state later. A roster. Who do we tap for our first mountain climb trip? Sarah stared at her friend with a comical frown and squinted eyes, before eventually relenting as James gave her a puppy dog look of innocence in return. She wasn't done arguing with him about his own self-worth, but they could circle back to that probably every day for the rest of their lives. Fine, she gasped out. Okay, here's a thought. Take some new people. New how? James asked. Because I was going to say we should make sure people have dungeon survivability powers in some way first. You know, make sure no one gets killed. Also, I don't know if I trust the new people with my life. He paused. Wait, hang on, that's weird. They came to work for us because they are the kind of people we're trusting. Damn it, my brain's getting stuck in the world's way of thinking. I'm forgetting what we're supposed to be. He looked around the room suddenly. I have an office. When did this happen? You needed somewhere people could make appointments to talk to you, even though you are never here. Sarah instantly dropped back into the mock glower for a second. But yeah, we've got some cool new people. Take, like, Bill or Mark. Take Marjorie. She'd probably... Actually, no, never mind. Don't take Marjorie. James cleared his throat. Elle's mom? He asked. Isn't she... Okay, I know magic makes the line fuzzy. Isn't she a little old for dungeon delving? She's only 55, and she's in pretty good shape, but she has other reasons to probably not go that aren't my place to talk about. Sarah shrugged. Maybe just take Elle. Or ask the whole order and go from there. You'll get volunteers. Like, put up a public notice that we've got a new dungeon and need delvers? Wait, did we become an adventurers guild? God damn it, this is exactly why I called us an order. Sarah giggled at him. Look, it's not like you're assigning quests to kill 10 rats in the sewers. Are you? Wait, I said it and then I thought it. Is that a thing we're doing? James rolled his eyes. No, that is not a thing we're doing. He spun his chair back and forth as he thought. Anyway, new people would probably be good. I just worry that they won't have the build-up of purples, right? We've got armory packages ready to go, Sarah said. We can rapidly make someone harder to kill, which is good, given all this. Her voice faltered slightly. James noticed. It was hard not to. Sarah was not a subtle person. It was clear she was having a lot of trouble keeping her smile in place lately. Not all the time, but sometimes. More and more, there were stumbling blocks that hit her really hard. There were deaths from her friends, the hostility of the world. Sarah just wanted everyone to be happy together and be happy with them. In a way, James saw a lot of his own worldview in her. The desire to build a better tomorrow, to lift others up alongside him, to see the best in everyone. But he also saw the cracks when that ran up against what they'd been through. The world, and the people in it, often weren't nice, weren't kind. They disappointed her, more than they did him. James kind of expected people to be kind of shit a lot of the time, but Sarah expected people to always be their best selves. Status quo, the mechanic, now the FBI, the Order had no shortage of people who didn't seem inclined to just sit down and discuss how to improve things like reasonable adults who wanted to live in a cool world. Entrenched powers with no interest in talking, only using force to get what they wanted. And he could clearly see it tearing her up. To James, those people were obstacles. He would navigate around them, or, if not given the choice, through them. His remorse for acting in self-defense against people who had decided that they were monsters more than the life forms that came from dungeons was low. To Sarah, though, every death was a tragedy, and the cost in their own lives was already higher than James would ever be okay with himself. To her, it must feel like being trapped under the proverbial mountain. Hey, he said out loud, blinking a concerned look at her. Do you want to go get a coffee later? Just hang out for a little while? Sarah sniffed slightly, looked away to wipe at the corner of her eye before she turned back, smile in place like everything was fine. Maybe, she said. I've got a lot of stuff to do for the podcast and... Hey, James interrupted her with a soft smile. We should go get a coffee later and just hang out for a while. Yeah, Sarah said, with tired emphasis. Yeah, okay. All right, James said, still smiling. Now, go get your podcast stuff done. If you see anyone who seems like they might want to risk their life climbing a mountain, send them my way. He paused. Actually, here's a question. Do you think the camera condos might like it? Frequency of sunlight might, but she's kind of into the whole risking your life and mechanical limb thing. Sarah thought for a second. I'll ask, though. Heck, we've got more and more diverse roster in terms of species these days. We should make the effort to spice things up. Mix it around a bit. Affirmative action in action? James smirked. I mean, sort of. The Camercondas and now the Rat Roaches, they're full sophants who are starting with literally nothing. They don't even have a society. They can't, like... Our world is occupied by people who might not accept them, you know? Covered in cities that aren't built for them. None of them have families, bank accounts, driver's licenses. They have nowhere to fall back on. Sarah gave James a wide-eyed look. That's bad, and we should help them. James held up an index finger. I agree. But also, point of order, Texture of Bark Dust has a bank account. What? How? I don't actually know. I think we tricked the bank by adding her to someone else's account and then removing that person, but like, I get your point. Actually, I should check in with the Rat Roaches, see how they're acclimating to Tennessee, and then see if either of them want to come along. James nodded. Alright, let's round up a few potentials. I'll meet you later tonight. You'll probably meet me when lunch is served because Nate is making burritos and you haven't been replaced by a mimic yet, Sarah joked as she kicked herself off the chair as she'd assembled into a bench and rolled to her feet. I'll see who's interested, though. Oh, and don't forget to get the name of the mountain. You already know what it is. James narrowed his eyes at her. You're too smug. You already know. They already talked to you. Gotta go. Bye. Sarah bolted out the door, ducking under a passing Karen's arm, only barely avoiding knocking her drink to the floor. Sorry, I'll explain later, James heard her yell from down the hall as she ran away. Karen paused in the door to James's office, turning her head without moving the rest of her body or shifting the manila folder full of paperwork she was holding to look at him. There's a budget report sitting under your keyboard. Costs for response are stabilizing, but our payroll is incredibly high relative to our income. I've made some recommendations on potential investments. Also, the building Officium Mundi is located in is currently for lease. It looks as though the company is suspending operations due to pandemic losses. Expensive, but we should look into acquiring it for long-term viability. Additionally, Harvey will be up in 10 minutes to talk to you about an independent review board for response. My daughter and her friends will be arriving after that to meet with you. Karen, are you my secretary? James asked, legitimately confused. No, The older woman paused. Oh. I'm going to assign one of the new interns to act as your secretary, she said. One of them is competent. It will be a good fit. Thanks, James deadpanned, and then, following that, actually, though, thanks. I'll read over this really quick. I appreciate the work you do. Yes, well... Karen gave the smallest hint of a smile, and then continued past his door. Everyone around here is better at their jobs than I am, James muttered to himself. I'm starting to feel like this whole operation would be better if I was just a random delver and someone else took over being in charge of things. He grumbled. I could just stack dungeon powers, harvest chunks of precious metals, not have to read budget reports. Karen could read the budget reports after she wrote them, and then make the decisions about the budget reports she was writing. Okay, well, no, she could give advice to whoever does make the decisions. I could... You could be that person. Harvey's deep voice caught James's attention from his door. You know, 'cause that's what you're doing anyway. Executive authority makes me itch, James told him. Nice beard, he added, with an appreciative head tilt. Harvey's beard had evolved to a perfectly maintained pulse of curly hair that covered his chin and mouth. It was almost a sharp geometric shape, except for the depth to it and the twists of the salt and pepper curls. "Thanks," the man said. "So, speaking of making you itch." "Yeah, Karen mentioned this. You have an outline for the thing we were talking about?" "I'll do you one better." Harvey took a seat, but somehow didn't appear to relax in any meaningful way. "We're all set to go." "Really? No problem finding volunteers, or convincing people this was real?" James asked, his voice a little incredulous. Harvey just cocked an eyebrow at him. "I know you're a little focused on certain things, but we've been getting notice. I think the only reason we aren't getting requests for interviews from cable news is they can't find us, and there might be something weird going on with what cable news can and can't talk about. Not politically, magically. And politically. We do have a policy of hanging up on non-emergency calls, though." Harvey gave a harsh grin. "People are aware of us, and more importantly, there are people who are willing to work with us to make sure we end up being what we promised." "What are we promising anyway?" James asked. "I mean, I've done some response stuff, but I'm usually just kind of focused on the job at hand. I know in abstract we're trying to replace the police, but what's our actual, billing? What do we title ourselves?" "Civilian Need Focused Emergency Response," Harvey said, "which will now be operating with independent review and oversight." "Okay. Details," James said, leaning back and giving Harvey the floor. The plan was simple, and in both their opinions, something they really needed to get set in stone early. Response had an alarming amount of power. Not actual government authority or a monopoly on violence, but they were operating in the capacity of people who had personal power and used it without a policy beyond "we are helping," which wasn't bad on its own, but it wasn't future-proof. It didn't scale up very well. So, a proactive measure was devised, at least as a transitional step. They'd stolen the idea wholesale from a number of civil rights groups who were petitioning for something similar to be in place for the actual American police. An independent review body that had actual authority to remove knights and aspirants from the response positions, who would be tasked with handling any complaints about use of force or criminal activity. It had been a negotiation to set up. Between the Order's membership, they had a surprisingly large number of contacts in local civil rights organizations, but fewer in the other places where they had started operating, like parts of Colorado or Ohio. Still, after they had a short list of names and reached out to those people, getting them to agree in the first place had been challenging. Not because they were against the idea. A lot of people, a shocking number of people, James had thought at the time, having limited experience with this beyond the abstract, were almost instantly on board with replacing the police as a viable, functioning agency. The problems cropped up, as always, in the details, and the questions. Questions like, who were they? What were their credentials? How did they expect to expand their operation? And then, once they had gotten through the explanation that magic was real and they could teleport, there were more practical questions. Was the review board a full-time job? How were they planning to manage their membership? What counted as criminal activity when they were clearly setting their own code of conduct? Could they be penalized somehow for failing to uphold a law, if that ever came up? Also, how did the review board maintain itself? Who selected membership? Who verified they weren't bad actors? Were they allowed to make decisions about Response's operations, like using dungeon tech that could fall into the wrong hands, or even just employing the Camerondas, who weren't citizens of anywhere? The answers had taken months to hash out, but finally, Harvey had something concrete to give to James and to introduce to the Order. To start with, it was a 9-person group, with policies for creating new units as Response did, fully let in on the Order's secrets, but operating as outsiders. Finding people willing to accept that had been the tricky part, and Harvey willingly admitted that half of the initial batch of nominations were currently training as Response members. Their authority was rooted in the Order respecting their calls, but that was to be baked into the culture of Response from now on. Also, their authority was to be a little more literal, with long-term members of the review board being offered authorities, the infomorph species, to complement the nature of their roles. It was, Harvey freely admitted, a giant risk. But it was a risk that he and James agreed was necessary. If they were going to build Response into a system that could be trusted and not just a capricious band of well-intentioned vigilantes, they needed to have rules that mattered. The existence of systems was never the problem. Only ones with no oversight and no compassion. And James fully intended to make sure Response had both. A system where being good was the default. That was the idea. So, what now? James asked, when Harvey was done with the explanation and getting James to look over some paperwork, including briefs on all 9 of their new watchers. Harvey folded his hands calmly in his lap. Now I get back to work, and so do you. Remember, we were already following all the rules, we just negotiated other people to keep an eye on us for. We're self-regulating, but that's not good enough if we're going to be a public force for good. So, if you pick up a shift, know that you need to follow our use of force restrictions. Oh, also, if you find anything in the office tonight that works as a conflict resolution tool, a few hundred copies handed out to us wouldn't go amiss. James nodded. All right. Hey, have I thanked you lately for doing all the hard work while I screw around? Because thanks, you are doing a great job. Oh, I know, Harvey nodded, mouth set in the line that was trying not to grin and not really succeeding. Also, isn't your screwing around mostly... He was cut off as the floor rippled, and a slight shifting sound came from the hallway outside. Harvey kicked his chair back and was on his feet in a blink, while James vaulted his desk, a mostly decorative letter opener gripped in his hand like a knife as he planted his feet on the stilling floor by the door. Harvey slid out into the hallway, and James moved in the other direction, coming face to face with Karen, leading her assistant forward in a shooter's crouch, a revolver in the older accountant's hand aimed down the hall. James nodded at her, and the 4 of them moved through the upstairs office together, looking for the disturbance. Outside looks fine, Harvey said, staring down at LA through the windows. No more fires than normal. Conference area is empty, Karen added. James? James had stopped and was staring at the elevator. Or toward the elevator, anyway. The others moved up next to him, relaxing as he let his own shoulders slump, and setting the letter opener calmly on a nearby desk. Yeah, we're fine, he said. What was that? Harvey followed his line of sight, trying to figure out why the elevator door was so important. Well, James said. How many doors are over there? 3. Elevator, stairs, supply closet. Karen stopped talking and frowned. 4. There are 4 doors. Why? I'll bet you $1 it's research testing green orbs, James offered. Anyone? Harvey gave James a shake of his head. Active response members aren't allowed to gamble, he said. That includes James, by the way, he told Karen's assistant, who looked like she was about to pull out her wallet and take the bet. Also, don't take that bet, Harvey concluded. James rolled his eyes as he walked over and opened the new door, looking down the seemingly endless spiral of concrete steps and metal railing. All right, well, I've got to go get lunch and talk to some teenagers. I think I'll take the stairs. I could use some exercise. He shook his head. This building is going to be so fucking weird by the time we're done with it, he muttered. Anyway, Harvey, thanks. Check in with me when it's all set up if you want me to meet the council, or whatever we're calling them. It's a committee, Karen informed him bluntly, because not everything in the world needs to be dramatic. Sorry, I can't hear you over all these stairs, James's voice echoed from the inside of the concrete stairwell as he let the door close behind him. It took him 8 flights of stairs before he regretted his choice. On the one hand, it was important to make sure that the new stairwell was normal and safe, but on the other hand, it was apparently exactly as many stairs from the office to the lair as it was floors for the elevator to cross. At least there were no other doors out. That would have been a massive security and existential headache. All right. James sat at one of the tables in the dining room. It was a busy afternoon, dozens of members of the various arms of the order assembling to share conversations and lunch. The volume of chatter wrapped the room in a comfortable, only slightly too loud blanket, ebbing and flowing as occasionally someone would get too excited, and then the whole room would go quiet slightly in self-aware reaction. Across from him, 3 people sat. 2 human teenagers and 1 Camerconda for whom age was not a meaningful measure of maturity. Morgan, Elizabeth, and Color of Dawn, the 3 non-engineers who had survived the first encounter the Order had with the dungeon in the medically slippery mountain. In a move James hoped would become a tradition for the Order, they were the ones given a first crack at naming the thing. Chavoy had abdicated her naming privileges, saying that she couldn't be trusted with something like that, and Momo had argued that she hadn't been first, just the rescue crew, so that left these 3. All right, Morgan repeated, looking around nervously. Oh, right, James shook himself. Lost my train of thought. You 3 decided on a name? Sort of? Elizabeth's response was subdued and questioning. We aren't sure if there's a style or something we're supposed to follow. James chuckled. Well, I admit I'm pretty fond of the dramatic names that sound like fantasy locations. He polished his fingernails on the sleeve of his shirt. That said, I haven't actually named any of these myself, and now that I think of it, it's always been Sarah, so if you want a style, I'd ask her, but also it's your call. Morgan wanted to call it Fuck This and provide no context. Color of Dawn ratted out its friend. We disagreed. I mean, James blinked, struggling to bridge his willingness to let them name the thing with his instant rejection of that suggestion. I mean, we could, sort of. Morgan held up his hands defensively. No, it's fine. I was kidding, he said. Sorry, we were trying to come up with something that wasn't dumb. It's really hard. It kind of is, yeah, James agreed. Names are weird. Hell, I feel weird every time I name something in the office. Color of Dawn here had to pick its own name, which must have been kind of scary. I got lucky by being given a name I don't totally hate, you know? I never have to think about it. He sighed. Anyway, I'm rambling, probably because I'm hungry, and I want to get a burrito before everyone eats everything Nate prepared. Did you end up deciding on something? Is it okay if we call it Winter's Climb? Liz asked, blushing a little and not meeting James's eye. It sounds silly when I say it out loud, but when it wasn't trying to kill us, it was really pretty in there. I don't want to give it a rude name just because it's dangerous. And these 2 say they didn't hate that name, so... James smiled reassuringly at all of them as Liz trailed off. Yeah, you all okay with that? He asked. Yeah, it feels okay to me, Morgan said. Color of Dawn nodded, a bobbing motion of its camera head. I, too, find it reasonable. It is all the parts of winter I have seen, and nothing else. Yeah, Wait, hang on. Haven't you experienced a winter? James suddenly started thinking back. Yeah, you were here last year, right? Did we ever have snow? Color of Dawn froze in its bobbing. The snow is not a dungeon thing? It asked, alarmed. All right, I'm going to go get lunch. Morgan, Liz, have fun with that. Thanks for the name. Make sure to let Sarah know what you settled on, if you haven't already, which I think you did. If you change your mind, it's all right, but once it gets out there, it'll kind of be locked in because people are going to start saying it and get used to it, unless there's some kind of big change. Like with the road? Elizabeth asked. Yeah, exactly, James nodded. I guess that's something else getting talked about, huh? Everyone thinks it's scary. I mostly know about it from Sarah's recap, but it killed so many people, didn't it? Elizabeth looked down at her hands, and James noted with amusement that from either side of her, Morgan and Color of Dawn almost subconsciously moved to comfort her. And now people are wanting to keep exploring it, and I don't get it. Momo's down there now, and all I can think is that she might get hurt. James nodded, a pitying frown on his face. The dungeons are all dangerous, he said. But I think, so far, the mountain, Winter's Climb, is tied for the meanest. It trapped you, right? The others, even Route Horizon, they're all just trying to live. It's also important to make the distinction that the Route didn't kill anyone. One angry old guy who stole the dungeon's power did. Doesn't that sound like everything else in the world? Morgan grumbled. Hey, I'm the adult here who's supposed to make that observation. James gave a mock outburst, putting his hand over his chest as he stood up to go grab his lunch. Damn kids, stealing my world-weary attitude. He switched back to a normal voice to finish talking to them. But seriously, the dungeons aren't safe, but they aren't all evil. I think your name's a good one. It gives it the benefit of the doubt. And my origin point? Color of Dawn asked, giving James an almost angry look with its lens. I didn't say I thought they were right, James said, his voice hardening. Just that they aren't all evil. He sighed. It's hard. There's no easy answer to this. We're sort of just trying to muddle through it all and leave things a little bit better in our wake. But hey, you're not dumb. Maybe you three can figure it out. He gave them a nod and a smile. Enjoy your lunch. I'm going to get my food and get going. After he walked off, the trio rotated around the table to occupy it for themselves. Is he making fun of us? Morgan asked, looking after where James had walked off to the kitchen. I don't think he does that, Liz said. Why does he refer to us as a group? Color of Dawn asked, curious. The two humans looked at the Camerconda and then back at each other, a little bit of confusion on their faces. I don't know. Are we? Morgan asked. I don't think we're a group like James thinks we're a group, Elizabeth said. But also, we should talk about it later. We need to have lunch before we're late for the movie. Color of Dawn and Morgan both jolted to attention. Right, Morgan exclaimed. That's the day. Oh, and Nick asked me if I wanted to go with him to the range tonight. Something about bracelets? He said you two could come if you wanted. Movie first, then we'll see. Color of Dawn gave it a looping nod of a gesture. Also, food first. Still getting used to eating. Should do it more. From his spot hiding inside the swinging door to the kitchen, James smirked as he watched the three of them through the window. Yep, he noted. That is a group. What the hell are you doing lurking in my kitchen? Nate's voice from directly behind him snapped him back to reality with a shock of adrenaline. Nothing! Lunch, James explained. Burrito, please. Also, a spare heart, if you have one. Mine just exploded. Nate glared at him before jerking a thumb toward a trio of bagged lunches on the counter. Your stuff's ready. Get out of here before a server hits you with the door. Not willing to dispute the power of his reflexes, especially having been ambushed like that, James just nodded as politely as possible, grabbed the food, and tore a telepad with his teeth. He was gone before he noticed Nate shaking his head and holding back his own smile. Arush crouched in a cautious position on the roof of what he was told used to be a police station. What a police was, or why they were stationed here, were questions he had technically had answered, but still didn't fully comprehend. There were a lot of things he didn't fully comprehend. Civilization was a big one. Food that tasted good was a small one, but they were all linked. There were so many connections between so many things. He had never needed to track that many connections in his life. Previously, there were two connections that mattered. There was the angry, vicious bond between the beautiful one and all the others she owned the lives of, and there was the gentle, impossibly fragile bond between himself and Kika. Those were their names. They had always had names, ever since they'd met each other. The soft sound of affection that Kika called him had become the thing that everyone referred to him as. The noise of alert he used to get the smaller one's attention when danger was near had become his name as well. It was strange. Public, out in the open. Others, who saw their bond openly and did not try to use it to hurt them, who instead took them in and told them they were valuable. Arush was waiting for the trap to close, but it still hadn't. He had been gifted many things. Armor against the elements and small pests in the form of decadently comfortable cloth, nutrition that didn't taste like waste and fire, and words. So many words. He had a word for his partner now. Partner. More words, too. Boyfriend, lover, companion. It still made acidic drops of emotion form in the corners of his many eyes to think it. Words that he had never known that he needed. Arush had been living in a desert for his whole life, and he had just been shown an ocean. Even that thought was a metaphor. He had time and context to make metaphors, sitting on this empty roof, staring out over the remains of what had once been a city, a population center 50 times the size of what he knew of his home, emptied. He couldn't comprehend the threat that had done it, but he could understand that this place had undergone a great pain. Pain was something he understood quite well. The human who had, ultimately, brought him to this vantage point had come by earlier today. The empty paper bag and the remnant crumbs of a burrito still sitting nearby paid testament to that visit. They had spoken for some time. Arush had been nervous in his own way at first. Not nervous as the human, James, seemed to think, but nervously waiting for the fighting to start. For one or the other to bitterly subdue their foe and force them to comply. But that raw fear had never come to pass. Instead, James had just wanted to talk. He struggled not with tooth and claw, but with tone and rhetoric. He was here not to force an oath of obedience, but to ask questions, to make sure that Arush and Kika were doing okay. The rat roach choked a wet laugh, thinking about it. He did not know if he would ever be okay. James had asked them what they wanted, and he had patiently waited for Arush to think and then explain. His own thoughts had surprised him, once he was guided to think them at least. What did he want? He wanted to never be afraid again. He wanted more of this, more food, more sun, more air, more of the strange people who now surrounded him in this building, the people who smiled at him and his partner, who had never once tried to hurt him, even in the short time that they had been here. He didn't care anymore if it was a long trap. He would walk into it willingly if it was. He couldn't imagine making another choice. Arush wanted to be strong enough to keep this. James had nodded. He'd understood. Arush could see it. Around the eyes. Different eyes. So very different from what he saw every day, but just as expressive. The human had never felt pain like him, never known a life like his, but somehow he understood anyway. He asked something different. If Arush was strong enough, would he take this kind of comfort away from others to keep it for himself? That was also a good question, and he had taken a long time to think of the answer. Long enough that James had found a book to read while he patiently waited for Arush to puzzle over it. Eventually he had decided no. No, because if he did that, there would be every chance that he would be taking it from someone like Kika, like his partner. Now that he was out here, now that he knew there were others like him who felt things, how could he hurt them, knowing that any of them could be the person he loved? James had folded his book shut and gently set it on the edge of the roof before asking one last question. In a few days I'm going somewhere like your origin point, he'd said. Less dark, more cold. It'll be dangerous and risky, but it might be something that gets me more strength, to protect what I think is important. James had met Arush's eyes and asked, "You want to come with me?" Arush hadn't known then. It had been hours of thinking now. James had left, telling him that he had time to decide, and there would be more opportunities even if he said no now. But it had been long enough that his partner had woken up and found him on the roof, long enough that the other members of the cleanup crew here had checked in on them, brought them dinner and a blanket, long enough the stars had come out. Stars. So many tiny dots of light, keeping a clean and refreshing watch on the world. The world was too big, Arush decided, for him to ever know his place in it. But next to him, Kika pressed against his side under the blanket, a trio of hands softly running freshly trimmed claws through his fur and over parts of his chitin, and Arush realized that he didn't need to know his place in the world, only his place here. "I am going to go," he rasped out, his voice still aching from overuse today, not yet modified to what the humans promised would be a state that didn't hurt anymore, as if that were even possible. Kika froze, burrowing into his side under the blanket, clutching tightly to his partner. Not forever, Arush reassured him. Just to keep you safe. His partner made a hissing click, their own secret language, a voice they would never really give up. They didn't have a word for why, but they had a signal for, "You won't leave me behind." Not a question, not at this point in their lives, just a statement, a reminder. If Arush was going, Kika was too. "Stay," the larger rat roach half whispered. "Be safe. Back before you miss me." "Miss you already," the thin, wispy voice came from under their blanket. Arush's muzzle cracked open in a grin. He tried not to feel bad as the sizzling blue liquid that was one of his bodily fluids dripped out onto the blanket and left hissing black marks on it. It didn't take many words for them to know each other's hearts. But here, he felt like he could speak forever and never fully explain why. Why he felt he had to go, why he felt he owed them, but also why he wanted to see the horizon. There were so many whys all mixed up in one burning feeling that James's question had ignited in him. A thought that didn't just linger, but grew and expanded, hour by hour, as Arush sat on the roof and looked at the stars with his boyfriend. No one should ever be as afraid as he had been. If this world rejected that, he'd just have to find an answer in another one. Two of his arms, one of his main ones and one smaller part, wrapped his partner closer to him, under one blanket of cotton and one of stars. Whatever was needed to keep Kika safe, he would do it gladly. And then, he would never have to be afraid again. "Your test came back negative," Deb informed James as he was busy adding a Delvers Wanted notice to the community board in the front lobby. "You're clear to go. Though, again, you'll need to teleport, since Australia has some strict quarantine rules still in place, which you will be flagrantly breaking." To be fair, it's not that flagrant if I'm getting multiple tests before teleporting to a remote part of the wilderness and only sticking around long enough to get eaten by a dungeon. "The dungeon is in Australia," Deb informed him, crossing her arms. "I know there's no laws about it, but come on, dungeons are where they are." "Ah, tautologies," James sighed. "Well, thanks anyway. Hey, you want to come?" "Can't. Filling in for somebody at a real hospital." Deb gave a sigh of her own. "I'm not going to say that doctor is taking advantage of us owing him favors, but he certainly is persuasive when he wants to be." James nodded. "I getcha. Well, anyone you know who might want to go?" "Please don't take Sunny, at least not for the first one." Deb gave James a pleading look. "I know she wants to go, but it's a mountain, and her robot arms aren't strong enough to make that even a little safe. I don't know, take Nate or something." "I was thinking that, but Sarah shot down my idea. Something about Nate being busy leading a cadre of spies since JP's out of town." "This place is weird," Deb sighed. "Oh, quick thing. I know you're going to the office tonight. Do you mind doing a test copy run of just a bunch of yellows? If there's even one minor medical skill, it could help a lot more than I think you really know." James grimaced. "I am loath to give up on a run of cancer orbs, honestly. We're already only using 8 of our 9 duplications on that. It feels like it'll never be enough." I had Alex run the numbers. Medical skill in the right place could save more lives. Not in the same way, it's not as splashy, but it's important. And it doesn't need to be all the time. Just test a bunch of the small ones, please." Deb gave James a look that told him that this was important to her. He sighed. "Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Especially since a lot of people aren't getting the chance to delve these days, huh? You're pretty much just doing med student stuff, right?" "Among other things," Deb confirmed. "It's gotten out of control." "What has?" "Yes." James snorted a laugh at the answer. "All right," he said. "I've got a date to go get coffee with my best friend. I don't know when we'll talk next, but I'll post a list of gains to the server. A lot of people are interested in what we find tonight anyway, so I'll include the copied yellows. Sound good?" "Thanks, James." Deb smiled at him, dimples in her cheeks showing. Good luck. You too, he said. Good luck to all of us. Constantly, really. James' legs ached. Currently, he was sitting against the wall of the upper floor of the cubicle tower right near the door to Officium Mundi. A strange feeling of the wall behind him being too thin pervaded his body, a reminder that if he pressed back too hard, he would tumble through 200 feet of open air and probably land on something hard. But oddly, it didn't worry him right now. He felt perfectly in control of himself. It was just information. He wouldn't fall unless he wanted to. Well, perfectly in control of all parts of himself except his legs. Legs that had taken him on a 5-mile circuit of several of the known points of interest within the twisting hallways of the office. Legs that had gotten him through a chase with a mall cart. Legs that had climbed up 3 of these cubicle towers today and back down 2 of them. In short, James was tired, and he was explaining all of this to an Anesh who was very patiently pretending to listen while carefully pouring coffee grounds across the floor and conference table. James, I love you, but this sounds exhausting, and I still have 2 more of these to do today. James looked around the upper floor. Yeah, hang on. Didn't you have an assistant or something? Where's Momo? Momo has been notably absent from a lot of stuff for a week or 2. Also, she's in Tennessee. And my assistants have all either ended up going on to more interesting delves or being a cameraconda who found the experience engaging, but not worth coming back here. Anesh looked up and frowned, pivoting his head to stare at James with intense eyes. James, am I boring? He asked. I worry that I'm boring. With a quick check around the room to make sure he wasn't being pranked somehow, James tentatively answered, You are setting up a magic ritual that will spawn roughly 120 magical bath beads that cure cancer? Anyone could do that and still be boring about it, Anesh countered. I'm not having this argument with you. Very well, Anesh relented with a dramatic sigh. Well, how was your dungeon experience today? Did you and I find anything cool? James couldn't help but give a strange burst of laughter. I don't get why you ask that. You will literally have all the memories in a few hours. Anesh smiled calmly. Well, when I do, I'll have the memories of discovering things with you for the first time, and also hearing them from you for the first time. It's more collective memories of you. That's... Aw, okay. That was more emotionally open than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a joke. James pressed his hands together over his chest, giving Anesh a wide-eyed gaze. Afraid not. Only relentless love and all of that. Anesh waved a hand idly in James' direction without looking, drawing a much louder burst of laughter from his boyfriend at the juxtaposition of tone. Where is the other me, actually? I could be a good assistant. I think you already know that he's avoiding doing this because he won the coin flip. James grinned. Also, he's out with Alana, doing more hunting for oranges. Ah, Anesh already knew that, because he knew himself, but it still wasn't going to stop him from grumbling. Well, did find anything good while you were out? They sort of had. Aside from the box of small yellows that were on the table to be copied and tested at Deb's request, they'd come back with what had become a pretty standard haul for a delve. A few $1,000s, a sealed briefcase for future investigation, a USB stick that appeared to store network connection, a stack of various random candy, partially because there was an ongoing theory that eating dungeon candy did in fact expand how many blues you could have absorbed, and partially because one of them was called lemon alligators and there was no way in hell either James or Alana was going to pass on that. A few purple orbs that were set aside for sharing with order members that weren't active delvers, and one green earmarked for a local library. Then just a whole host of random magic items that were probably going to get rendered down into blues eventually. We've got like 3 pairs of headphones, James said. And they've all got that itch to them, you know? That feeling that they're dungeon tech. Actually, you spotted one of them, so that's cool. No idea what any of them do yet, though. It's like that way too often. We don't give research enough credit for stumbling into answers sometimes. Anesh nodded. Remember the headphones that read books to you if you plugged them into a book? I think my favorite part about that was learning that Reed doesn't have an internal voice when he reads, and then learning that a lot of people don't, which is why audiobooks are so popular. James got sidetracked briefly, talking about using the headphones for rapid production of audiobooks, before Anesh got him back on track by verbally nudging him toward anything else they'd found. Ah, right. Well, the main thing is I don't know, James admitted. So many times we find something that seems absurd, but it doesn't work the way we want, and then we'll find something that seems like kind of whatever, but it turns out it's got more uses and bigger uses than I ever thought about. He shrugged. So, I don't know. I don't know if the backpack that randomizes its interior is useful. I don't know if the dress shirt that changes colors is useful. It's all so small and pointless most of the time. He thumped his head against the wall behind him, eliciting a hollow thud, hopefully not from his skull. That's why I like the orbs. They might be dumb, but I don't have to carry them around or worry about them. Did you get any good skills, at least? Anesh asked sympathetically. I didn't get any skills. I brought them here, to copy, James said, like it was obvious. Anesh frowned at him, trying to raise a single eyebrow in consternation, and only half succeeding. James, you're allowed to benefit from the dungeon too, you know. You don't have to give everything away. I can already teleport and walk off being hit by a car, James protested. I can... You cannot walk off being hit by a car, and you're going to take the yellow copies and be the one to test them. Anesh crossed his arms and stared at James evenly until his boyfriend, sputtering and protesting, eventually ran out of excuses and relented. Good, Anesh said, slapping the projector, consuming 2 pounds of coffee grounds in a flash of light and spawning a box of exacting dimensions full of purple orbs. Give me 10 minutes to set this up again, and then you can eat a bunch of skills. I can help, James said, shoving himself to his knees with a groan. Just let me get my circulation working again. I thought you could endure anything, Anesh smirked. I heard something about walking off being hit by a car? I haven't learned enough pangolin facts to upgrade my endurance, and I lied about the car thing. Shut up, James rebutted, staggering upright, stretching his arms with bony pops. All right, give me one of the scoops. Turn the diagram board so I can see it. Slightly less than 15 minutes later, another case popped into existence. James, being James, still didn't want to take every single orb that was copied. He left a good chunk of them for others to test too, but he took enough to make Anesh stop mock scowling at him at least, letting knowledge and a litany of alien intrusive thoughts pour into his head as it told him what exactly he was learning. +1 skill rank, history, carpentry. +1 skill rank, gambling, baccarat. +1 skill rank, manufacture, pipe, ceramic. +1 skill rank, construction, insulation. +1 skill rank, baking, muffin, cranberry. +1 skill rank, pike. +1 skill rank, ritual, pre-game, baseball. +1 skill rank, cleaning, mopping. +1 skill rank, art, spray paint. +1 skill rank, athletics, climbing. +1 skill rank, templating, maintenance report, water district, New Zealand. +1 skill rank, repair, furniture, bed frame. +1 skill rank, animals, shark. +1 skill rank, biology, human, common diagnosis. +1 skill rank, demographics, Europe, southern. +1 skill rank, fabrication, shoes. +1 skill rank, music, theremin, theory. +1 skill rank, government, policy, Hong Kong. +1 skill rank, cooking, chicken. +1 skill rank, breakdancing. Knowledge flooded James's mind, 100 chunks separated into 1,000 facts, points of data like lights in the night. In an instant, he knew more than he had yesterday, more than he'd ever learn on his own in a decade about some things. A few pieces struck him as he processed it. There was a skill that Deb would want in human biology. There was also a skill he wanted more of in climbing before they tackled the mountain. And there were a couple of skills that would make him even more eager to get into a kitchen. Before he could start up a conversation with Anesh going over the finer points of different polearm styles, and why he'd need to tap the budget to commission a very specific one for personal use, James found himself sitting in a classroom, surrounded by an angry void. "You must choose!" The bladed ball of hate clad in a tweed jacket that was the teacher stood at the front of the class. "Plagiarist! Decide, and—" James cut the thing off. "Endurance again," he said. He had zero interest in the other two options. Instinct might be useful, but toxicity didn't feel right today. Probably wouldn't feel right ever. Then he was back where he had been, legs suddenly feeling not better exactly, but despite the aches and pains, he knew now that he could run for another 5 miles if he needed to. He croaked out a word, calling up his syllabus from the Akashic sewer. Lesson continues. Basketball. 2. 288 out of 1200. Aim 1. Agility 1. Lesson continues. Biology. 2. 122 out of 1800. Endurance 2. "All right," James said to Anesh. "So, the lessons do scale up way more if you have 2 of them. The second one goes up way more, and the whole jump between here and the classroom place is jarring and awful even if I don't remember most of it," he said. "Also, I know a lot about sharks now." "Just sharks?" Anesh asked with a worried smile. "Sharks kill fewer humans every year than vending machines," James replied. Was that part of a new skill rank? That's a very specific skill rank." James shrugged. "No, I already knew that one. Also, hey, we should get moving before the night's over. You should take some of these too, by the way. Enjoy a skill rank before we share it with the others." Anesh hummed and considered the box of assorted copied orbs that James had already plucked several out of like a selection of chocolates. Unlike his boyfriend, he started carefully, before eventually winding his hand through the container to pick a single orb that just felt right to him. "If you say so," he told James, "but just the one, and then we can get going." The orb popped in his fingers, golden dust drifting away into nothing. Plus .4 skill ranks. Mathematics. Geometry. Anesh smirked at his good choice, or good fortune, and relayed the earned skill to James. "How are you so good at picking those?" James asked, confused. "That is, like, the 8th math orb that you have gotten." "The dungeon likes me," Anesh said simply. "Now let's go share these and give Deb the good news about her own luck tonight."